Welcome everyone. Today we're going to discuss on generative AI. We have our world famous speaker, Professor David Smith, Dr. Tamanna, and Madam Ali Rice. Professor David Smith from USA, Dr. Tamanna from India, Madam Ali Rice from Britain, and from Bangladesh. So let's start this dialogue. My first questions to Professor David Smith: what is generative AI and how does it different from traditional AI models?
Well, Sharif, great question there. We today are looking at a place, particularly with generative AI, where we're looking at a new era in artificial intelligence, where machines in the past were really there, in the early parts of AI, were there to assist us. But today, it's also able to create with us and create for us. And, generative AI has the ability to produce new content, whether it's art, music, literature, even scientific discoveries and others. So we're seeing that really push itself into a new area of artificial intelligence that is there. And, you know, uh, to answer the base question, generative AI really refers to the data science, the algorithms that can create new content. And what's exciting about generative AI is this is based on training data. And so what they're doing is they're creating a lot of large learning modules, which are text, images, music, video, and they're using this to generate the knowledge that is being used to drive the answers and the creation. One of the newest trends, though, is while the LLMs are great, that one of the new terms is SLMs, which are small learning modules there. And what's important about them is we're beginning to customize more of the learning that the generative AI uses. And we're beginning to create it where it can be unique answers for us as individuals, for our companies, our governments, and others like that, as opposed to the generalized. One of the challenges you see with generative AI with the LLMs is that the larger those LLMs go and the more machine learning they're doing, the more difficult it is to keep them to be accurate. And you begin to see that the generative AI models fall into two really very different camps. One of them are called GANs, which are generative adversarial networks, and the other ones are VAEs, which are variational autoencoders. And it's interesting. The generative ones consist of two neural networks, one that generates and one that discriminates against each other to produce the outputs. And because of this, they work against each other to be error checking and more. And we're seeing more and more of the GANs come in place today. But there's just so many different places where the applications are growing every day, the benefits are pushing, but also the challenges, particularly with the quality of the information that's being used to train them. Uh, some of the ethical concerns, some of the facts that they are extremely, extremely resource intensive. So that, Sharif, I think that's not a bad first answer to your question.
Thank you. Good morning, Professor Rob, for joining today's sessions. I want to give you special thanks. Happy New Year. My first question for you, what are the primary type of models used in generative AI such as Janes, Bayes, and Transformer?
Well, I think David already kind of covered some of those. And I apologize for coming in a little bit late. As you look at the underlying models, the models for generative AI are often conform to the jobs they have to do. This is the big difference between AGI and generative AI. Generative AI tend to be purpose-built tools to handle a specific task or operation, and so the model is created to mimic the environment and to address the kinds of questions or tasks that the operator, that the creator wants to have addressed, and then you layer models into a solution that can handle a complex task. So you get potentially multiple generative AI instances handling a single complex task. And by doing so, you can get close to what we thought AGI was probably going to be, but it's far more expensive and far more difficult to do it with a specific tool. So as I understand it, each of the models is specifically designed to handle the tasks that it was created to address. And if it is a complex task, then you use multiple generative AI models. Multiple generative AI models to address the complex task, and that way you can solve the kinds of problems we thought that only AGI was going to be able to address with generative AI. And by the way, we're able to solve some of the problems we thought only quantum computers could address using the same methodology. That was a discovery that NVIDIA made earlier last year, where they discovered that they were able to address some of the problems they only thought quantum computers could do with layered generative AI models, and solve the tasks long before quantum computers became viable. In fact, right now it doesn't look like quantum computers are going to get as widespread use as we initially thought, because of the ability to use these AI models to accomplish the same task by breaking down the task into compartments, into segments, and having the different generative AI models address that complex task. The difference between quantum computing and normal computing was thought to be the fact that quantum computing could take extremely large data sets and analyze them, some things that could take regular computing years, if not centuries, to do. Quantum computing could do in minutes. But if you can break down the tasks into components, then it really only leaves the very largest of data sets for quantum computers, and a lot of the intermediate work that we thought quantum was going to be able to do can now be done by generative AI. So that's how I'd like to address that particular question. Now,
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, you are from creative industry. My question for you, how is generative AI transforming creative field like art, music, and literature?
Yeah, I think it's quite a contentious issue, to be honest. So I think it's amazing that you can put in a sentence and it can create something from nothing, which obviously if you're hand implementing something, or even using Photoshop and things like that, that obviously it's much more labor intensive to do something the traditional way. And I would also say, some of the animations, that there's an animation that I know some friends' children watch that are under 5, and apparently it's all AI generated. And there's something about the kind of the nature of the animation that really hasn't got any life, or that there's something really quite sinister about the characters that have been generated. And I'm involved in quite a lot of illustration as well, and I think that illustrated CGI characters for some reason don't have the same nuances and sensitivity as something that was hand rendered and kind of envisioned, if you see what I mean. So I think so there's a balance between it all, and there's musicians and lots of artists that I know. The ability to replicate something. When I did some of the research, they were saying that somebody brought all the Rembrandts together and then it's created an original Rembrandt that potentially could have been made by Rembrandt, but there was an original piece that was generated by AI. So it's amazing how they can kind of pull different things out and kind of get a composite piece together. So it's incredible, the time in there. But I think the underlying thing is that it's coming from an original thing that was hand rendered, and I do think that there's even a pencil drawing. I'm sure that still computers can't replicate the sensitivity of a pencil drawing and the subtlety of it. So I think that there's something that something that's human made, even a wood carving or something. There's something really incredible that the kind of spirit and energy that a human puts into something is lacking if it's kind of generated from a computer, I would say. So I think that's where the kind of subtle difference is.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, what you want to discuss about art, music, and literature?
Yeah. Dr. Sharif, I feel, I mean, as Eli also has spoken right now, Ali, and I guess music is something, I mean, these things that can be tackled differently. Music, a new kind of music can come up, I mean, a totally new system of music, which is not, hearable till now. You haven't been able to listen to that music. Something of that sort could have come out. Otherwise, generally what musicians do, they copy straight from different musicians. Similarly, with literature, literature is something which is something which can be used to bring, it can be in social sciences, it can be sciences, it can be sci-fi, any of these things, and new thoughts can come in, which probably till now have not been there. So for example, in the post-truth societies, what we need is a system whereby we have um, a literature which is totally different, something which is like, not like the same as the past. So we need to have those kind of systems. Then sci-fi, we many of these sci-fis have been truth. I mean, way before they came into being, the structure came out in 50 years from now. So I guess what we need to understand is that, science fiction is also something which can be generated by GAI, and that can encourage people to do more research on the planets across the galaxies, travel across galaxies, I mean, for example, spiritualism. You could have new kind of spiritual revolutions, so new things can come in, different things which have not been able to be seen till now would come in. And as far as philosophy is concerned, new systems of philosophies could come in, and something which has not been heard till now could come in. So I guess we all need to be attuned to GAI, and so that uh, you know it's like a model which is like, it's a subset of artificial intelligence that uses generative models to produce text, images, videos, or other forms of data, but the ones which are not repetitive. They are the ones which are like, they have to be seen in a way that were not seen before earlier. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, as you are from tech companies, what are the key applications of generative AI in industries like healthcare, finance, and entertainment?
Well, you've touched on many of the places where they are really key, and you look at some of the advances there where they're providing already ROI. For example, in healthcare, AI is helping decrease some of the routine burden from the healthcare professionals, particularly the doctors, the nurse practitioners, and the physician aides, and doing some of the basic parts of medicine and letting them focus more on the patient and the harder part. Also, AI is helping designing personalized treatment plans based on a lot of characteristics. For example, some of the more advanced healthcare AI is including genetic profiles and looking at a full range of healthcare options, including traditional homeopathic medicine and some of the newer things. Also in healthcare, one of the places where I'm excited about seeing some of the AI, particularly generative AI, is it will accelerate the discovery and development of new drugs by particularly predicting what are the molecular structures of these new compounds and drugs they're putting together, and really beginning to simulate their interactions. So the Rob has talked a lot, I have talked about in the past, and we've talked about digital twins. In healthcare, the concept of digital twins is really going very strong there. You see generative AI really being fundamentally transformation in education. You're seeing personalized educational content. You're seeing it used as virtual tutors, of going really after some of the problem areas. Dr. Sharif, one of our companies produces a generative AI 3D conversational avatar looking at social emotional learning and mental health. And it's bringing these to students in ways that traditional classroom teaching cannot do it. And that's going to be one of the big things as you begin to look at it. You mentioned the business side, and it's going to really be there in advances we see, from very simple ones like revolutionizing the way we do help desk and customer service. We're seeing it being used broadly in agriculture. We're also seeing it beginning to now make a fairly big impact in public services. And that is going to be one of the places where I think we will see a lot of the use for it. So, Dr. Sharif, I hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you. For Mr. Robin Durley, I want to know from your side, like, what are the major ethical concerns associated with the use of generative AI, such as deepfake, misinformation? Disinformation, misinformation is one of the major problem right now in India and Bangladesh. So, how we can solve it?
Well, like any tool, generative AI can be used for good or ill. It is not inherently law-abiding. It's a tool, and much like you can use a shovel to dig a hole or use a shovel to hit somebody over the head with, it can be abused. And the issue we've got, in fact, I was just getting briefed on this just before we went off on holiday, is that it's being heavily used now. Initially, a few months back, it was being used as a test for malware. No malware was being delivered or executed in the wild, but it was showing up as proof of concept. Well, that changed this last month. It's now being used as a delivery mechanism for malware, and it's not, at least as far as I know, it hasn't yet been used to create malware. We've got so much malware that is very effective that if you can get it on a machine, it's very capable. So maybe just a case where nobody felt the need. But in terms of delivering it, tricking somebody into installing it, and the interesting thing is, now that it's been used, used to be one click would infect your machine. Now it can take up to 3 clicks to infect your machine. But the generative AI convinces you to make all 3 clicks, and so it's being used very effectively as a delivery mechanism, which we consider to be illegal and certainly unethical. This really comes down to the fact, and this was something that I think both Google and Lifeboat Foundation identified well over a decade ago when they created their various defensive concepts, is the fact that we're probably going to need, I should say probably, we will undoubtedly need some type of an AI defense to move against the AI attack vectors. And so it really comes down to the people that are using the tool. It's just like we have an abundance of weapons here in the United States, and over the holidays we had several instances that were problematic, mostly with regard to vehicles. But the one guy with the vehicle in New Orleans was also shooting people as he was running over them. And a gun, like any other tool, can be used for law-abiding reasons, hunting, target shooting, and the rest, or for as a legitimate weapon of war. It can also be used to shoot your neighbor, and the tool has no inherent ethical concept to it. It's now in theory we could create generative AI models that were inherently ethical and that would be very difficult to turn to do something bad. But the thing is if we're getting to the point where AI can create AI, And so if the AI that you're using as a creation vehicle to write another AI, if it had strong ethical concepts, at least it's possible that it would resist or build in instant termination scripts that would cause the AIs that it created that were doing bad things to self-destruct. The thing is once it did that, the bad people wouldn't use that particular AI to create AIs anymore because it would be a failed product. So in the end, we have a lot of discussion with regard to ethics in AI. I think our issue is ethics in people. As long as people want to do bad things with tools, we're going to have problems with ethics and AI because the bad people are going to create bad tools. And do recognize that doesn't necessarily even take bad people. Some of the worst malware that's been created, the Stuxnet effort comes to mind, were created to attack people that were thought to be bad, but they jumped containment and they did significant amounts of damage to the world at large. And there lies, I think, one of the big difficulties with using AI as a weapons platform is containment becomes a problem, because when you create an AI that's to do harm, it's being specifically, even though in theory you're doing it to maybe go after terrorists or criminals or whatever, the AI can't really make that determination. It doesn't have the ability to think yet. It is not AGI yet, and so if you say, hey, you're being created and given a task to go in and destroy stuff, when it's given stuff to destroy, it's going to do that. It's like a bullet or a missile. You shoot it at a well, we just had this over the holidays too. We had an aircraft come down due to a Russian missile strike. They didn't intend to do it. It just, you aim the missile at an airliner, and it's going to take the airliner out. And the same thing is true with generative AI. It is a relatively, we talk about it like it's the end all be all, but it's a relatively simple in terms of intelligence. And so if you tell it to do something, it's going to do it. So the ethical concerns really come down to the people that are using it. And just as we've had difficulty in being able to mitigate malware and particularly ransomware from a global perspective, because people doing harm are in other countries, and some of those countries like Russia, it's perfectly legal to create these things that do harm as long as you don't do harm in country. And so in Russia, I mean, as long as we've got rules like that, where it's okay for Russia to attack the US, say, and do a significant amount of damage, that's not illegal in Russia, and to a large extent, depending on who's doing it, it's not really illegal for somebody in the US to do harm in Russia. AGI, generative AI it has the same kind of lack of restrictions. We really should be treating this much more like we're treating nuclear weapons with treaties and relatively solid rules. Though we should also point out that the nuclear containment isn't really working all that well right now either. So in the end, the flaw in AI really is in the people that create it. And as we talk about ethics and legality with regard to generative AI use, we're really talking about modifying human behavior, something we've been very, very bad at when it comes to addressing effectively bad actors on a global stage. So we can certainly build generative AIs that are very ethical and have a certain amount of resistance to do bad things, but it would require a willingness to take on that extra overhead. Because, for instance, if you're building an AI that's designed to go in and penetrate a particular secure environment and deliver a payload, how do you write ethics into that? You could try to put in an identifier that says, okay, this is only going to work on somebody that has ISIS in their name or something, but it would be a distinction that would be relatively easy to remove. And we know that we can now, with generative AI, we can look at fully operable code. We can in a matter of steps open that code up, change the code, identify things. I mean, I'll give you an example. With generative AI, there are tools now coming forward that allow you to go into an otherwise secure program and surface the passwords to access it. It goes in, it decompiles it, it finds the area where the password has has been placed, and then it provides in a matter of minutes the passwords that provide command and control for that particular application. Something that might have taken a hacker weeks, if not months, to do, if not years to do, can be done with generative AI in a matter of hours. And so is there anything wrong with it? And the way that you get the AI to do it is you're telling it you need to recover a password, and recovering a password is something that's perfectly legal if it's your application and you misplace the password. But if it's not your application and it's something that you're trying to penetrate to do something bad, then this is an unethical use of the product. But it's still a tool, and so the tool itself doesn't have a conscience. It can't tell right from wrong. You point it at something and tell it to destroy it. If it's got that capability, it's going to do exactly that. It's no different than any other type of tool. And so perhaps when we get to AGI, we'll be able to build in some level of intelligence where it will know to say no. But be aware that the people that create these kinds of tools, if they get the capability to create AGI, they're not going to want that kind of restriction in place for the AGI they create. And so we've got an even bigger problem coming with AGI because there's going to be a certain subset of the population that's going to want to create tools that don't have these restrictions on them, maybe for good reasons. They just don't want it to slow down. They want it to be performant. They recognize that the ethical aspects of that will make the tool slower, make it less performant. Imagine an AGI weapon with ethical concerns. You drop a smart bomb on somebody and the bomb says, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, it's pretty much worthless as a weapon to whoever's deployed it. So in the end, I think as we argue ethics, it's really arguing the ethics of the individual. We are the weakest link. In fact, as we looked at every single scenario that we had with AI and malware, it still came down to the individual user was the weakest link. That's who they're going after. It's the individual that's the easiest to compromise. And until we address the ethical problems with people, I think really spending a lot of time talking about ethics and artificial intelligence it's just kind of we're spinning our wheels because the people that are going to do bad things are going to still do bad things, and AI isn't going to fix that. It doesn't fix people. It to a certain extent it just replaces them. And if it's replacing people that do bad things, it's going to do bad things at machine speeds, and that's going to be a serious problem. It is a serious problem.
Thank you. This is very interesting, but there are response from audience. Mr. David Smith or anyone want to respond? Like his question, what universal planetary metaverse may come?
Well, so I'll try that since it's an esoteric question. I'll try it first. So when we're talking about the metaverse, where did that thing go? The universal planetary metaverse. So the metaverse is this idea different than the multiverse. The metaverse is the idea of using something like Earth 2, the NVIDIA concept of creating a second Earth that's simulated, and then using that secondary Earth to better handle large-scale weather events, or certainly better detect them, because depending on how good the digital twin is, and then be use of the metaverse to create a digital twin, depending on how good the digital twin is, you should be able to run simulations, be able to determine as little as, remember the what was it called? The butterfly effect, where a small event at one part of the planet could create a big event at the other side of the planet. Depending on the accuracy and detail of the Omniverse created tool, Earth 2, you could make very accurate and very heavily advanced predictions about major weather events, and again, even earthquakes could be predicted depending on how accurate the digital twin was and how comprehensive the sensors that keep the digital twin and its reality connected. You can do amazing things, and then you've got the entertainment side of the metaverse, or the training side of the metaverse, which is being able to create digital twins, which we use right now, by the way, to train autonomous vehicles. Right now, the vast majority of autonomous vehicles are trained in the automotive version of NVIDIA's metaverse, and that way you are able to do years of training at machine speeds in minutes and hours, and so you're able to create much more capable, which we kind of need because we saw GM exit their Cruise program, but much more capable autonomous vehicles, vehicles that are much safer, much more reliable, etc. So the metaverse, the various metaverses that will be created will have particularly targeted areas where they're going to focus: entertainment, training, weather simulation. And so that's at least right now for where the metaverse technology is likely where we're going to focus. Of course, the most fun is going to be able to walk into an environment that's like Game of Thrones, or go into a metaverse that's created around a fictional world. Could be a past world if you wanted to explore the world of the 1920s or the 1800s or the 1700s, or speak to Jesus. Those are things that you might be able to do in the metaverse, recognizing that as you move to metaverses that are created based on fiction, that your ability to because we don't have a lot of written words from Jesus. I'm using examples. So if you walk into a metaverse and you're talking to Jesus, you're talking to somebody's view what the guy would have been, not necessarily who he was. But that doesn't tend to matter to a lot of people, given it's all fictional anyway. So the creation is fictional, and be able to do things like talk to your dead father or your dead mother or your dead great grandfather or your unborn son or daughter, depending on how the simulation is created. And I expect all of that will be possible in the next few years. So there'll be a lot of metaverses, and the metaverse and our ability to engage in it will be connected to our ability to connect our senses into the metaverse and fool our mind into thinking the metaverse is the real universe, not a simulation. And that's all in our future. And how we're going to deal with that is going to be a whole different can of worms. There was part of the movie, what does it do? Robotic Sheep Dream. I forgot the actual name of the book, but it became a movie series, and the guy's wife, the detective's wife in the movie, she drops into the metaverse and refuses to come out. So he's effectively single. She just drops into the metaverse, and that's where she wants to spend her life. And throughout the movie and the books, the guy's treated like his wife has died, because they've gone into that virtual reality and don't want to emerge. And that's going to be a problem. We already have that problem with video games today, where kids go into the video game, they get locked into the leveling area of advancement, which is very programmatic and very different than the real world. If you go into a game and you play a certain amount of time, you get credit for that, you advance based on that. Work isn't like that at all, for the most part. Some military tends to be a little closer. And so do government jobs with their various levels. But if you go into business, you can work your butt off, and you may never get a promotion or get advanced or get a raise. And that can be very frustrating to somebody that's come up in a metaverse type of environment, in a gaming environment, that's used to getting a reward for everything that they do, whether whatever they did was consistent with what the goals of the game were or not. And that lack of reality makes it very hard for them to integrate with society. So we're going to have a lot of issues with regard to metaverses and reality, depending on how those metaverses are created and how deeply embedded the user gets within that metaverse. So to answer the question, there are going to be a lot of metaverses focused on very different things. And the difficulty we're going to have is, as we become more and more engaged in those metaverses, being able to pull out of those metaverses and deal with the real world is going to become more difficult, depending on how that metaverse is created.
Thank you. Madam Ali-Rice, my next question for you: what strategies can be employed to ensure the responsible use of generative AI in society?
Well, my thoughts are that it needs to have purpose. So that, and I think for me, kind of humanity needs to be at its core, really. So if it's not necessarily improving things, then I just think that we need to look at the way we can improve reality instead of trying to escape from it all the time. And I think that that entertainment to a certain extent. So, well, I just think anything, you know, when people smoke or vape or drink or whatever, that essentially there is kind of a level of just kind of enjoying yourself, and then it gets to the stage when some people just escape from the fact that they're not happy with their reality. And I always tell my kids if they're not happy with their reality, they need to change what they're doing, not, you know, not try and. So essentially, I just think we need to come to a situation when we're happy in what we do and we're using our passions and skills and kind of arguably our genius as well, and that essentially that shouldn't necessarily be reliant on technology. Or so I don't think AI is necessarily the solution. I still think that most people haven't even tapped into their own power and ability. So I think the thing is that ideally the solutions need to come into kind of that human integrity, and technology obviously makes things easier and quicker, and you know, that kind of efficiency, but it shouldn't replace you shouldn't replace carers with kind of robots so that there isn't a human connection, you know. So I think the thing is that we need to encourage human connection. One of the things I love about technology is that we're connected from all around the world. We actually impact innovation, and we share stories that, you know, so there's things that I've heard on the innovation forum that are just crazy to me, but it's amazing that they're happening. So I think the thing is that connection and kind of integration of what's possible is amazing. But I think the thing is that it still needs to have a purpose and kind of be people and planet kind, so that we're kind of moving forward with humanity and integrity, you know. So it's kind of, so it is going to kind of take care of our elderly population, or encourage them to kind of have well-being and stay fit and healthy, so that, you know, their lives prolonged with quality, or, you know, so that we create worlds so that our young people have a future that's still connected to nature. Because I think, you know, in all that, I've always been connected to nature ever since I was little, and it's never changed. And it's the one thing that, you know, that I think we should protect. And I think the thing is that we are all part of the natural world, you know. So it's really easy for people in cities particularly to forget that, you know, fresh air and clean water, you know, they're the things that we all rely on fundamentally. So yeah, so I think it has to enhance our lives for the better. And as you know, if people turn the power off tomorrow, we have to sustain ourselves in the way that we are, you know. So that there has to be kind of we have to know what reality is. And I think the thing is that we create our own reality as well. So our choices fundamentally affect our futures. So, you know, I think it does have to come with ethical terms and consciousness. Yeah, so that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Dr. Tamanna, there is a question from audience regarding what is agentic AI, if you want to respond to this.
Okay, if you allow me, I can just answer one question which previously the same viewer asked about, you know, like metaphysics, this thing. So what really it is, you know, in Indian sages, for example, even now they're talking about, you know, in Hindi or Sanskrit, we call it Ghatakash, Matakash, Chitakash. So all these kind of things, you know, the world is within you as well as outside you. So, you know, you can have lots and lots of way of looking at world if we have, you know, GAI as well as the spiritual traditions of the world coming together. I guess we would be able to do much better, you know, as far as the world, uh, solving world's problems are concerned. So I guess, I mean, that's a very spiritual leaders in India have dealt, not leaders, the sages. I'm not talking about the current leaders. I'm talking about people who are really hidden, you know, in the cages, in some places where they are not um, visible to anybody, but they have developed such sciences whereby you can transfer yourself to different planets, different Milky Ways, different gods, for example. You know, you are able to visualize them. So I guess that is something that I wanted to say. And as far as agentic AI is concerned, It refers to artificial intelligence systems that are capable of autonomous action and decision making. These systems often an agentic AI system is designed to make decisions, handle complex situations, and in some cases adjust its behaviors autonomously. In the last case, the AI agent operates without human oversight, instead using algorithms and environmental data to optimize its behavior. And however, today AI still generally operates with human-defined objectives. AI that can fully set and pursue its own goals remains theoretical. Although many of today's AI systems exhibit agentic behaviors, they are typically specialized for particular tasks and limited in scope for safety and stability reasons. Although some narrow AI systems can adapt to new challenges in controlled environments, they are not intended for totally unstructured scenarios. Agentic general AI capable of autonomous decision making across a broader and more diverse range of tasks does not currently exist. So, I guess, how does agentic AI differ from traditional AI? Traditional AI systems are designed to solve specific predefined tasks, although many do display adaptability with that purview. Traditional AI includes everything that's simple rule-based AI algorithms to complex systems such as GI models like ChatGPT that rely on advanced natural language processing techniques. In contrast, agentic AI systems are designed to take initiative in pursuing objectives. Rather than executing commands or routines set by humans, agentic AI systems are intended to adjust their strategies and explore their environments in real terms. So, this independent, goal oriented behavior is what agentic AI its agency. Traditional AI, by comparison, has specific boundaries and requires at least some human inputs, and agentic AI, on the other hand, extends the scope of what AI do, encompassing levels of reasoning, planning, and autonomy that traditional AI, even highly advanced form of it, can't match. So, I guess this is what I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Uh, my next question for you, yeah, what strategies can be employed to ensure the responsible use of generative AI in society?
Well, there's a lot of different applications which you're going to say to how to ensure it. And, Rob addressed part of this one earlier in that we need to put regulatory things in place. We need to change how we handle fairness and biases. And really, how can we take the concepts we're using in there, but you have to go out to the various stakeholders, which include governments. The organization includes researchers, includes large companies, small companies, and the public. And so part of what you have to do with them is look through a set of strategies. You have to develop ethical guidelines and frameworks. You have to develop and adapt these standards for best practices and deployment. But these standards must be widely adopted and adhered by the community. We're seeing places where the circumstances change the ground rules, and they're very much so. Rob mentioned earlier some of the conflict with Russia and Ukraine and Russia and the rest of the world. Recently we had a first in the Ukraine, and that was the first time robotics and autonomous robotics have been used as the entire fighting force against an enemy. And so, if you go back and think, the very first rule of robotics is do no harm to humans. But yet, here we launched this whole front of robotics that were equipped with machine guns and bombs and stuff under autonomous control that violated the first rule of robotics and some of the first rules of AI. So nothing is absolute as you begin to look at this, and it will change to adapt. Uh, Rob mentioned, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, we have to begin to establish ethical review boards to begin to look and try to look at compliance. There needs to be some transparency and accountability. We need to openly be transparent, openly share about the AI models. What are the data sources? What are the learning modules used? What are the methodologies? How do they resolve conflicting information? How do they resolve biases? And how can you put in place accountability mechanisms to hold developers and organizations accountable for their outputs and the impacts of their systems? And we've talked about bias and fairness quite a bit. And how can we build bias mitigation techniques? Do we need to have AI that builds these bias mitigation techniques to build the AI to create the AI we're using? I mean, you go through that, but how can you do it? The other thing we know, and this is where I talked about earlier about LLMs and SLMs and customized data, you've got to have diverse data sets, and you need to train these on multiple ones to reduce bias and to really look at them. Regulatory action and governance, legislation has to be put in place. But once again, you need common legislation and ways to enforce it. And you need this international cooperation to really harmonize the standards for responsible use of AI, to harmonize the regulation for the responsible use. You have to have education awareness. We often talk, Sharif, about how we have to educate the citizens and the companies. This is very much so. What are not only the benefits, but the risk and ethical consideration. And AI literacy is all over the board. And we look at them. Privacy, data protection, we've talked about that at a lot. But what can we do? We have to have collaboration, stakeholder engagement. You've got to engage these stakeholders deeply, including the policymakers, the industry leaders, the researchers, the general public, to really make a decision-making process related to it. You have to have the feedback from broad parts of the global population, how to shape these AI policies and procedures. But more than just doing that, one of the biggest things we need to do this, Sharif, is we have to have some continuous monitoring. How can we assess the impacts of the social, ethical, and economic impacts of these generative AI systems? And one of the first things is you look at companies and science and building these, what is the continuous improvement? How can we get into a continuous improvement loop that works at hyperspeed? Because the advances in AI are going on a much steeper curve than classical systems. So how can we begin to do this type of continuous improvement, continuous regulation, continuous frameworks at a speed that can keep up with where we're headed? So Sharif, that's my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, my next questions. What role does generative AI play in advancing artificial general intelligence and human-machine collaboration?
Well, it's a building block. The generative AI is going to be what's going to be used to help code AGI. It's the simulations that it helps create will go to informing what will be done to create AGI. The biggest problem with AGI up until just recently was there wasn't a consistent definition of what it was.
Right.
OpenAI has come up with a definition that I think is workable, so that I think is at least partially solved. But it's going to be a building block. It is a foundational element. As I mentioned before, generative AI, multiple models in generative AI are now being used to create something at least somewhat similar to what AGI will be. So we're going to get a better concept of what we can do and when we can do it. Right now, OpenAI I think believes that they'll have AGI in the next 5 years. In fact, I think they brought it in last time I checked, so it might be 2 or 3 years. out. And since they're creating the definition and and creating the definition of something that you want to do, and then setting a timeline forward is a great way to actually achieve the underlying goal, because you can inform the goal in a way that allows you to achieve it much more quickly, because you have knowledge of what your current capability is now, and you've created a goal that is in theory is achievable. So my belief is that they're probably going to have a workable AGI model, at least using their definition. Whether we all agree with that definition or not is something else to be determined. But they'll have a working AGI before the end of the decade. I think when we come back to the ethics of the new form, the new model. And by the way, the movie I was talking about was Blade Runner. I was blanking the movie, and the title of the book was "Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep?" But I think what we're going to quickly realize, that if we really want to have an AGI that is performant and does good, we're going to have to spend some time training people into wanting an AGI that is performant and that's good. The weak element in this creation path are people, and people are going to want to get to revenue quickly. I mean, we've got serious ethical concerns. AGI is going to be, if generative AI is making millionaires and billionaires, AGI is going to make trillionaires, because the end result is AGI is a human replacement technology. Generative AI can be used in a similar fashion, but it's kludgy. AGI is designed to replace people, and computers by any measure are going to be cheaper because there's no medical, no hourly wages. Once you get to scale and you get the computational power you need to do AGI, you're going to be able to do an AGI employee for far cheaper than you can do a human employee. That's going to take us a while to get there. We did have that experiment with Baxter a few years back, where they created an assembly line worker that cost $25,000 for Baxter, and they discovered that people were actually cheaper than the robot was, which was kind of fascinating in and of itself. But as we cost reduce technology, which we always do, then you get a crossover point, and suddenly you don't need people for a whole lot of jobs, and so at some point, I think we really need to focus AI, whether we're talking AGI or generative AI, on making better people, because that's really where we're broken. And we can go back to the movie The Matrix, and the very prophetic elements that created the Matrix, and some silly stuff too, using people as batteries is silly. But in terms of what's likely going to happen as we create AIs and autonomous robots that can do the jobs of people, there's going to be a conflict. Large numbers of people are going to become unemployed, particularly given that our education systems are so subpar at the moment. And we're seeing this, I think, a kind of an early indicator of this with H-1 visa issues that we're currently experiencing here in the United States. With H-1B visas, you can bring on board a foreign-born employee. You can pay them less because their wage basis is far lower, and if they lose their job, they lose the visa and they get deported. And so, in effect, they become low-cost workers that are immovable, a kind of slight step above slavery if the program is abused, and because they can't leave, they can't if you're abusive to them, if you're not promoting them, if you're not giving them a fair wage, and they quit, well, they get deported. That doesn't happen with any other class of worker. And so it is a very abusive method of acquiring workers. And to fix it would be simple. It just say you're not going to get, or you've had a job, you quit it for whatever reason. You don't get deported. It would be the way you'd fix it, and then they can perform like any other worker, and it would be very fair, much more fair for them. But we see Musk and Ramaswamy both arguing for H-1B visas, and the reason is they want that very cheap labor that isn't mobile, that can't leave. And in Silicon Valley, we've had other efforts like this where the companies collaborated and agreed that they wouldn't take workers from each other. That was seen as anti-competitive, antitrust, and it was discontinued and was caught by the government. But it showcases the companies very much, if something is not done, are very much going to deploy these tools to create cheap labor. And by doing so, they're going to create a conflict between real labor and cheap labor, the generative AI labor, the AI robotic labor, that's going to result in fairly significant upheaval. So whether we're going to have a country, there's another movie coming out later on this year that talks about what happens when you have the conflict and they ship all the robots to a different digital country where they're disposed of, and then those robots revolt. Also something that's somewhat unlikely given the repair nature of the robotics, but it's showcasing that at least the Gestalt is recognizing we're approaching a fairly significant conflict, a conflict between people and robots. And if we want to avoid that conflict, we very quickly need to pivot this technology to creating better people, people that are much more performant, people that can compete better with robotic counterparts, and then alter the robotic efforts so that they're much more focused, as IBM initially said, on enhancing people and less focused on replacing them, because you get broad numbers of people that become unemployed and unemployable. You're going to have social disruption like nobody's business. You're going to have revolts. You're going to have violent strikes. If you want to see some of the strikes we have, you can go back and look at some of the Borac strike that occurred several decades ago that I was trained on, and you had helicopters getting shot in the air. You had managers being buried in anthills. You had Green Berets guarding water sources. I mean, it was they called it a strike. It was war, and we're going to get that at scale. And so the focus really needs to be heavily shifted to enhancing people, creating better people, or we're on a displacement path. And the path we're on right now is a displacement path. There is no doubt in my mind, unless we do something fairly radically, fairly soon, that we're going to have a huge problem with large-scale unemployment and a lot of people being unemployable. And so using AI to assure that outcome does not occur, as opposed to using it to assure the outcome does occur, is going to make a huge difference in whether or not we survive as a species. And it's going to be, it's probably one of the biggest problems we're going to have this century, is assuring that there is a future for the human worker.
Thank you, Madam Ali Rice. What's your closing remarks for today's sessions?
Okay. Well, I think, to be honest, that I think, because as a creative, I actually think one of the things when I was at school, and then I did my A-levels and went on to do a degree, that the creative industry was one that they suggested that you didn't go into, and you couldn't make money, and you couldn't, and essentially I think that creativity gives you an edge, and the creative industry is one of the things that's expanding. So I think the thing is, and it ties in brilliantly with innovation as well. So my experience of young people is that they probably have the solutions for tomorrow, and also the innovation and the kind of sense of possibility that we can do things differently. And I think one of the things that happens is that, and I don't necessarily think that I think that AI is probably driven by the technology companies just to see how far it can go. But I think from young people's point of view, that's not necessarily what they're harnessing. They're looking at features that offer something different, and so that they can kind of utilize their talents and their gifts. So I think that's probably things that are going to happen that no one predicts, because I think this young generation has a voice and is well informed, and I don't think necessarily we have the same information at our fingertips or the same passion to make a difference and change things. So sometimes I question whether the industry is making the decisions for the general populace just to see how far it can push it, because I don't understand why you'd spend your time trying to, unless you're getting to the stage when people get to enjoy their lives and do something different. Why would you displace people so that they're more unhappy or unfulfilled than they already are, if you see what I mean? So I think the thing is, there has to be a solution so people, that they have families, and, so I think it's about kind of having a life-work balance. Is that maybe not working 5 days a week, 9 to, it's kind of like giving people freedom so that they can innovate and grow and learn and do something with their lives, and encourage their children to do the same. So I think, and that's kind of kind of coalitions. I think it's crazy in this day and age that there's wars going on around the world. We got locked down in 2020, and that was like a war on our own consciousness. And I just think that the powers that be, I think we need to question what the underlying agenda is, to be honest, because the technology companies are probably part and parcel of the lack of consciousness, and I just think we need to move forward so that there is a humanitarian solution, that there's more equality, more so people have healthy, happy lives that have some kind of future that's got some worth and some purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Tamanna. What's your closing remarks?
Yes, I personally feel that we should be able to mix spirituality with science. Because many of our scholars, spiritual scholars, are extremely scientific in nature. For example, many of them talk about the fact that there are worlds across the worlds. I mean, they talk about something which is like Shiva, Mahashiva, Ghatakash, those kind of things. And similarly, we talk about the Milky Ways, different planets, for example. So AI, science, and spirituality together can help us all evolve systems whereby you have we would be able to reach places where we haven't been able to reach till now. So I guess different spiritual systems should come together. I'm not talking about fake sages. I'm talking about the ones who really have adopted spiritualism in a proper manner and who are learned. And they are existing right now in India. So they talk about the world, a world here, a small world which is existing in earth. One is in the heaven, one is beyond heaven, and one is even beyond that. So that's basically, if you interpret it, it means that it is something which is to do with the it's something to do with the science. So science also talks about different planets. So I guess if we could do that, and GAI could help us with that, that's going to be amazing.
Thank you. Mr. David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, Sharif, thank you again for allowing me to be part of the discussion today. It's been very good. As we look at the future of generative AI, there's some scalability limitations that were in some of the questions that we really didn't cover, but these include things like computational resources. We're seeing some advances, particularly in hybrid computational approaches, but computational resources are big. The data requirements, the model sizes, these are some really bad scalability requirements. Reliability. There's a lot of places where the non-deterministic part of model of the generative AI can be very disruptive. I tried an experiment during part of the Christmas area where I went to 5 different AI tools, asked the same question, and I actually got 5 very different answers. So, this is something that you can begin to see, and it's going to be a challenge as we go down there. Some of the general big challenges are what's the complexity of some of the real world problems. Generative AI is pretty good with explicit tasks, but it doesn't handle multidimensional problems really well, particularly where it requires contextual understanding. There's no transparency in most of them. And as I said, the environmental impact is just tremendous as you begin to look at where we are today. So where are we going? How can we leverage this? How can we begin to start leveraging all the advances in the generative AI models, such as the transformers and GANs and the others we've talked about, and the ones that was brought up with the agenetical AI? How can we give generative AI more of the ability to think creatively and solve complex problems? How do we do multimodal integration, where we integrate text, images, audio, sensor data, and everything to help it interact with the world in a more human-like manner? And how can we enhance, and this is one that I'm not seeing a lot of work being done on today, the human-machine collaboration. How can we help it really work, particularly in some of the hard decision areas where we're using it? And finally, uh, how do we ensure the ethical use? How do we mitigate the bias? How can we keep human oversight in place, particularly where we see it's very easy to overcome that, like I mentioned before with the killer robots that have now been used in war for the first time. So these are all the issues we have to face as we go forward. Has generative AI made an impact? Huge impact. If companies aren't using some form of generative AI, they're at a competitive disadvantage today. But we still need to turn the corner on understanding the impact of it and how it can be used. Over the holidays, I had a bunch of business leaders over to the house for different events, and around the table, we got into these discussions on how can we ensure that AI gives us the right answer? Because what we've seen is AI often does not give us the correct answer. And several of these business leaders gave great examples of where generative AI has made up information as part of their answer. So that's part of this future trend we need to understand. Generative AI is a great tool, but it really is not the solution to solving some of these complex problems in the form it is today. So Sharif, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, there's a fundamental flaw in how we're approaching artificial intelligence, and that flaw is us. We are basing artificial intelligence on as we move to AGI. We're basing it on a flexible model, and I think at some particular point we need to figure out what an ideal human should be, because that becomes the model for the AGI we're going to create in the future, and we should be using AI much more aggressively to help train people, to help, and I don't mean just train them to do jobs. I mean train them how to be better people. We do very little in training parents how to be parents. We do very little in training kids right from wrong. We kind of assume that they're going to pick it up, but name one class you had in school that really focused on ethics. You get ethical classes in college, but I don't recall any undergraduate class in ethics. We really didn't approach ethics until I got to graduate school. So that now some people do it sooner, but I think we ought to be teaching kids ethics as soon as we're teaching them math. We are having a major problem. Ali mentioned youth. We're having a major problem with kids coming out of school and going into work and then burning right out. I was seeing stats that indicated that the last graduating class had an average tenure in the new job approaching 6 months, and then they burn out and quit, which means we're not preparing these kids for work at all, or to live in the real world at all. The classes that I took as a kid in home economics and aren't regularly offered anymore. This appear to have gone the way of the dodo bird. They're obsolete, and so we're not teaching people how to live. We do showcase things. We argue that wealth is good, and certainly we've seen the implications of that. Back when we had the .com collapse in the late 90s, we had people coming out of school with engineering degrees and getting cars and great signing bonuses, and those things evaporated, and we almost lost an entire generation of engineers. And same thing happened when the aerospace industry collapsed a few decades earlier, where suddenly engineers are showing up as hourly workers because they couldn't get jobs. we really are letting the human population down. Our focus on creating autonomous machines, artificial intelligence, has an economic basis, and very little is being done to create better people. And since people become the template for the AIs of tomorrow, if we have flawed templates, we're going to have flawed AIs. And the underlying concept of using flawed AIs to replace flawed people that they're going to be able to make make decisions at machine speeds, is not going to be sustainable. So my view is we need to pivot pretty heavily and start focusing much more of our effort on creating better people and really coming up with a definition of what a better person should be. The underlying concept of the digital assistant that would be tied to a person from the very youngest age, that's primarily just focused on keeping that individual as a child safe, keeping them from being programmed to do bad things. Here in the United States, we just had a U.S. soldier get programmed to become a terrorist and took out a bunch of people in New Orleans. And so having something that could prevent against that, and generative AI can be used to do exactly that, to identify trends, to point out to the individual or those around them that they're spiraling, and using it in that fashion to create a better person. Now, recognize that the underlying ethical concerns of creating a better person are going to be problematic, because the government wants people that are conformant, and really as a society we don't want people that are totally conformant. We want people to challenge the status quo, but do so in the right fashion, not through violence, not through rebellion, but through argument and discourse. And yet we don't even train kids well into how to argue and create discourse. Yeah, we have debate classes, but debate, even if you take debate, is not the way you would typically argue to your parents, would not be how you'd argue to your boss, would not be how you'd argue to peers. You need to do it in such a way that you come to consensus and agreement. It's not always about winning. It's about coming to consensus. And so coming up with the definition of what a better person should be, and then using that to help create better people, I think would inform us into creating a better model for AI, and therefore better AIs that come forward in the future. So I think AI needs to be pivoted to help us create. Well, one, we need to get, not much as we're creating a definition for AGI, we need to have a solid definition that we rely on what a good person would be, and then use AI to help people through their various diversities. I'm not saying that everybody should be a Stepford wife, another movie that addressed this underlying problem, but created people that were able to think, that were able to challenge creatively the precepts that they've been given, to be able to argue effectively, to be able to look at a piece of information and determine whether it is in their best interest or whether it is true or not. The fact that we're not even focused on creating better people, certainly implies that our initial efforts into AGI in particular are going to be horrid and do far more damage than they're going to do good at scale, because our models are flawed. And since we're the model focusing on creating people that could better perform. I'll leave you with one example. I had a friend, and I got to know his father fairly well. He was very wealthy. In fact, he won and lost a number of fortunes, and he died poor, but he died happy. And the thing is what he discovered was it really didn't matter how much wealth you had to be happy. What happiness was created from within. And once you created the underlying concept and understood what made you happy, you could be happy as a mechanic, and potentially you could be happy as a rich person as well. But if you didn't create that, you were undoubtedly going to be unhappy at whatever you did, because you were never going to fill whatever void that was created within you, because you never understood the void. And so pivoting AI to helping us discover our best path to a better future is really where we should be focused. And unfortunately, that is not where the focus currently is. And that's my point on that.
I guess, Rob, as far as a good human being is concerned, I guess we need a lot of philosophy and spiritualism and the way of Platonic way of looking at things, and the way they used to have discussions, etc. Inductive and deductive way of looking at things. I guess that would be very interesting, and that is going to help us the way you are trying to reflect on the good people, and how AI should be looked at.
Yeah, I think the underlying difficulty is we hold up people like Elon Musk as people to emulate, and he's not a good person. And the people like the nurse that goes out of her way to help a patient, who works 48 hours a week, and on our spare time, or the teacher that uses their own money to help their kids in advance, and those are the kinds of heroes that we need to emulate. Not these oligarchs that take wealth and destroy their own lives and the lives around them. Yet we're holding up the wrong people as models, and so yeah, I agree. It's really time to rethink our approach to people.
Thank you. This is very interesting discussions, and hopefully our audience can learn a lot more interesting things from today's sessions. I request all of our audience, please share our content with the government agency, corporation, and academia. And I request also our speakers, Madam Ali Rai, Dr. Tamanna, and Rob, you can share our content. And I want to give thanks to all of our speakers. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care. See you next week.
Bye.
Next week.
Okay, bye.